Hey everyone, what's up? I'm Magrann. I am a queer cyborg game designer. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, please like and subscribe. I put out videos every few days, usually about twice a week right now. And today, because I'm designing a few games and getting ready to playtest some stuff at Origins Game Fair in Columbus, Ohio, I wanted to talk about accessibility, designing for accessibility in tabletop role-playing games and LARPs. Okay, the first thing is make it short. People, especially from marginalized communities, do not have a lot of time. And so we want to be able to look at something that is easy to read, maybe doesn't have a whole lot of fiction text, isn't like 300 pages long. Maybe is small, you could skim things or maybe even just read the rules to get an idea of how to play the game. So this type of game, this is accessible because it takes less time, right? Time is precious. As marginalized folks, we just have less of it. We often have to work harder to make equal pay with white cis men, stuff like that. So consider not writing a whole lot of extra fluff if you want diverse groups to be able to access your game. Make things easy to read. So, back in my early feminist heydays, I'd be like, why doesn't everyone just read this feminist theory that I can go to the library and just understand academic writing for hundreds of pages for? I didn't understand the privileged position I was coming from, right? Not everyone is as educated as me, not everyone went to college, and not even people who have gone to college or have PhDs do not necessarily like or understand academic text. And it's the same with complicated game text that involves really complex language or advanced language that not everyone has access to or understands. So the simpler you can make your language and not to say that you shouldn't have any flourish at all, but the easier you can communicate things to people, think about everyone trying to read what you're writing and how you can make it sound amazing, but also easy to understand at the same time. Character sheets. Try to pare them down to their absolute essentials. I see lots of character sheets. Some of it's bad design, like it just has too much stuff on there. It's hard to understand where it all is. Sometimes it's like 3 pages of character sheets and you have like an important stat on like your 3rd page instead of on the 1st page. But sometimes it's also just a lot of stuff that people are trying to cram onto a character sheet that maybe doesn't necessarily belong there. So really consider how you're designing your character sheet. Make sure you're putting all of the important stuff up on there, no matter what it is, like all the quick reference things that people might need to look at really quick in order to play the game or in order to play their character. Make sure it's visible, make sure it is easy to read, easy to see, and that, if you can afford it, or if you can do it yourself, designed well. Have step-by-step instructions for what to do. This is a big one because often we'll write chapters in game books about how the GM or the facilitator or whatever can run the game. It'll give inspiration for how to create NPCs and how to create drama and how to tell a story. But it won't necessarily say like what you actually have to do step by step when you sit down to play a game or run a LARP. And so I found like some friends and I had created like cheat sheets basically to run games, because that was actually like a step-by-step bullet point of like, okay, here's what you actually have to do. And I wish games just came with that, like here's your cheat sheet. When you sit down at the table, first, get everyone's names, and then you're gonna, talk about character creation. That's gonna take about a half hour. You'll want to do relationship building, which will then take this amount of time. Then you'll want to go through and mark all of these stats. And then, you can start playing. And when you start playing, here's the 10 steps of what playing looks like. I think that would be a really useful tool. And it basically allows people who are running the game, it takes some of the pressure off of them. They can they don't have to make it up as they go what the order of these things are. They just look at a checklist and they know how it's supposed to go. So that also makes the game more accessible, because people maybe who haven't run games often or never run games or have never played a game before can just look at that cheat sheet and be like, oh cool, this is what I'm supposed to do. Consider making your game GM-less. So similar to my previous point, you know, the GM or the facilitator, the MC, whatever you want to call it, has a lot of pressure and responsibility for gathering everyone together for the game, figuring out how the game works, pitching the game, having all the materials for the game, and then actually running the game. And for people who haven't run games before, even seasoned people, that can be a lot of work. And so if you basically say, well, in this game, the GM is the player, and all of the threats are coming from, you know, mechanics that happen in the game, and we're all storytelling them together, then it relieves some of the pressure off of the GM to have to actually run the game. And I found that, you know, people in marginalized communities, especially marginalized genders, people who are assigned female at birth, this helps a lot. It's like a good intro into, cool, this is what running a tabletop game looks like. This is what storytelling looks like collaboratively. Now I kind of feel like I could maybe run a GM game instead of a GM-less game. So think about doing that. Make sure your game does not require rules mastery. And what that means basically is that you have so many rules that they have to be memorized, looked up during play. They're very complicated. They don't always make sense. Creating a level of game mastery at the table means that there is maybe one or two people who know the rules better than everybody else, which gives them a kind of power. And often that can create an uncomfortable power dynamic for people who don't know those rules as well. You know, they have the rules kind of shouted at them, or, you know, people really enjoy rules lawyering and it creates uncomfortableness. If you don't even have in your game the situation where rules mastery could become a problem, then you can kind of avoid all of those uncomfortable dynamics. Use a big font. Not everyone can see very easily, and if everything is in a small font, it's just hard to see. Try to create a game that could be run either as a one-shot that could run in one night, you know, collectively, or over multiple nights. Again, not everyone has time to run a campaign. People's schedules are difficult to match up. You know, we're all busy. So making it possible for a game to run in one night, not only lets it run for like 1 4-hour night for your friends to get together, but it also makes it easy to run at conventions, which basically means more people could potentially play your game. So it makes it, you know, accessible to many different people based on their time and organization. Try to imagine the person playing your game has never played a role-playing game before in their life, and then try to write as though you're explaining it to them. And I don't necessarily mean like, here's the 101 of what a role-playing game is. I just mean a lot of the things that we assume because we've been playing games for so long. I've been playing games for like, I don't know, 25 years. That, you know, stuff like, you know, you have to get together, you don't talk over each other, or here's some social rules for the table, as well as how you can kind of play my game. Do you necessarily know that you might need to print out all these materials? Do you understand how a story can kind of flow in play and how multiple people can kind of add to that? And you can have players be in conversations with each other. You don't have to have a one-on-one conversation with each person. So kind of adding stuff like that into your text, into your game narrative, helps people play who've never played before. Diverse representation is super important. You know, not just representation, but also representation. If you are creating art for your game, if you have signature characters, make them diverse, make them from all different kinds of marginalized groups, different types of different countries, different cities, different areas in general, so that you have the ability to showcase and reflect the actual real world in your game, even if it's a fantasy or sci-fi game. You know, like the idea behind those things is to connect to human stories no matter what. And so the people playing your game, are diverse. So make sure that they're represented and it will be more accessible for them to play. Make sure your rules are decolonized. Now, decolonize is like a hot term right now. It's like a hot button thing. And I think in gaming communities in particular, it's getting popular again. Read up on post-colonialism and decolonization if you haven't heard of it before. But essentially, try to imagine a game without capitalism, without murder, without war, or make a game that subverts those themes, right? Because those are some of the main things that happen in colonized games, because colonizers do those things. It is what the Western world, much of the Western world, much of the Eastern world is built upon. We have all colonized. And you know, mixing of cultures is awesome, but the problem with it obviously is, you know, the violence that happens, the power struggles, erasure, all of those negative things. And lots of popular games like D&D mimic a lot of that colonization in play. So when you're designing, try to get away from that. Try to design something that subverts colonizing themes. Try to decolonize. And another thing that is great to put in your game is kind of like keywords or content warnings, like what is in your game, no matter what. You know, people can be triggered by any kind of context, and so the best thing to alert them to what might be in your game is just by listing everything that's in it. You can also just flat out include a statement that says there is no sexism, homophobia, or racism in this game. And you can also include safety mechanics. Safety mechanics allow players to play your game with additional tools to help them kind of moderate the social situations of the game. So that can be some great stuff to just include. People will read that and be like, oh cool, this is for me because this person has made it clear that I belong here. You know, and racism, sexism will not be tolerated. So consider putting that stuff in your game text as well somewhere, usually at the beginning or at the how to play section. What do you wish was in a game that made it more accessible for you? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you liked this video and these tips for designing accessibly were helpful to you. It isn't by no means an exhaustive list. They're just some things that I do when I'm designing my games. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next vid. Please subscribe to my Patreon. I'm almost at my first tier, my first goal. So I'm really excited. So please head over there. The link is in the subscription thing below. Subscription thing?